What is homeschooling?
For me, as a working mom, homeschooling means another full-time job.
Them becoming an independent learner who's self-motivated, who directs what they do every day, who's curious and follows up on ideas.
So
Yeah.
how can I really help my kids to be a top 1% in math?
Mark Andreessen to Naval Ravikant to many more all homeschool their kids, and they talk about it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of SaaSy Moms. I'm Wendy.
And I am Anya, and today we have an exciting episode. After our AI conversations and, me and Wendy wondering what our kids should do in the future, we have a special guest, Ben Summers. Hi, Ben. And Ben is the founder of a homeschooling platform for tech-forward parents who want better academics and their kids who like building things. Ben, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I am especially excited about this topic. And I told this to Wendy because, funny enough, my partner and I are discussing the potential education for my kid.
Yeah.
And my partner is a huge, huge supporter of schooling.
Yeah.
But for me, as a working mom, homeschooling means another full-time job. I guess today's goal is for us to talk about homeschooling and honestly understand if this is a reality for moms who also like building
Yeah.
their careers.
Yeah, maybe you can get started with Ben. Like, what is homeschooling? Because I have my kids all in public school.
Cool.
So homeschooling like never really occurred to me until like we actually had the episode of AI, like Anya said. And I
Yeah.
think the traditional way of schooling, I don't know if that is applicable for the future, the 20 years from now. So I'm actually curious, like, what is homeschooling?
Well, first, can I ask how old both your kids are?
Well, Anya's it's like 1 year old.
10, yeah,
Okay.
10 months. For me, it's 10 months, but we already discussed schooling.
Yeah,
Yes.
so she's already
Yeah.
like all future prepped. Mine are 8, so he's in grade 4, and then
Cool.
I have a 5-year-old twins as well, so they just started kindergarten.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. What is homeschooling? I mean, I think it's changed a lot over the last 30 years, 50 years. Back in the day, it was really mostly that you had very strong religious beliefs and didn't think that the school matched with your values. And so you pulled your kids out to educate them in kind of your religious traditions because of the separation of school and church and state in the US. That is not what it is today. I would say it's very different. 50 years ago, it was definitely, to Anya's point, a full-time job. You had to buy the work, you had to figure out which curriculums you wanted to buy, you had to buy them, you had to sit down with your kids, sit next to them while they did their work, you had to coach them, you had to grade their work, right? There was a ton of manual labor involved with actually just delivering the education to the kid, let alone providing all the other services that a school might provide. Today, I think it's really different. When my parents were kids, 1 in 1,000 kids in the US. So it's about 1% of the population. When I was a kid, it was about 1 in 100. So it got 10 times bigger. Today, it's almost 1 in 16. So there are 3.7 million kids in the US who are homeschooled, which is a really crazy high number. And that doesn't even necessarily include people who attend virtual school, which there are some really big virtual school products and companies. And so it's become, it's no longer, it's a little bit niche, maybe it's 5% of the population, but not in the same way it used to be. And so I say all that to homeschooling has changed a lot. Today, homeschooling is and there are so many ways to do it. You can have co-ops and you can buy full stack curriculums that do all the grading for you. And you can, there's ways to piecemeal whole education together. So today I would say it is an experience where the parent wants to take a more active role in their kids' education. They don't want to outsource everything to the local public school. And they have unique opinions about how their kids should learn. And that's what homeschooling is. It doesn't actually mean that you sit next to your kid and teach them.
Mm-hmm. And so why this movement is such like rapidly growing one? Because, I didn't know the data that you described, and it does
Yeah,
sound like 1 in 16 families choose
great.
homeschooling. Why? Why do parents like lose trust in traditional schools?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's actually a like a Lollapalooza of effects that are all creating this. Uh, I would say there's this phrase that what the rich do today is what everyone will do tomorrow. And
Mm-hmm.
it's actually it's the rich have always homeschooled, whether it's aristocrats and hiring private tutors, right? And even if they do normal school, they kind of supplement it with different things. And it's become really popular in the last 10 years. Most of the tech entrepreneurs that you know, from Mark Andreessen to Naval Ravikant to many more, all homeschool their kids and they talk about it. And I think that's had some impact. So that's one whole part, is I think it's actually become in certain circles a status symbol to homeschool your kids. It demonstrates that you care a lot about their education. You have enough free time and organizational and planning skills to be able to put something good for them together for them. And you have enough kind of income that you can actually beat the local public school. And so there's something around that. There's a second part that I think is huge, which is you used to buy workbooks, and the kids would do the workbooks, and you sat next to them, and then you'd grade them. Now there's a huge marketplace of great software that outperforms traditional school academics. So if you give your kid Beast Academy or Math Academy, they'll move at 2 grade levels a year and 40 minutes a day in math. And you don't have to do anything besides kind of like make sure that they log in. And it's engaging enough that the kids kind of stick with it. And so the first part is I think it's become a status symbol. And uh, the second part is you can do something really great without much work, where it used to take a lot of work. And then the third is policy and socio-political changes, like what you're talking about, falling trust in schools, which I think are a consequence of school shootings, bad academics, increase in bullying, right? Increase in depression rates, all these kinds of things that are the consequences of going to traditional school, and they're getting worse and worse. And then um, combined with that, because of that, you're seeing a lot of states introduce this thing called school choice, or ESAs, education savings accounts. And so in 17 states now, you can take your kid out of the local public school and the government will actually give you money to homeschool your kid. So in Arizona, you get about 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
In California, you can get anywhere from 3 to 5,000 per kid. And so there's fiscal support at the state level. There's falling trust in schools. There's these apps that can do a really great job at helping your kid learn better than traditional school. Then this other part, which is I think, it's always been kind of a high status thing to be able to spend a lot more time with your kids and influence who they become more, and outsource that less. So there's a lot of reasons, but that's my explanation for why it's pumping.
No, I think, I think all those reasons kind of make sense. I think where I am preview of seeing homeschooling, at least among the community I'm in, it's like primarily through bullying. That's what some of the moms I'm hearing. It's like, hey, I
Yeah.
just want to pull my kids out because they're just being bullied at school.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of on the rise. But I'm actually curious. So you mentioned kind of different education. Is it the same curriculum that people will learn? Like, what is the parent involvement? Like you mentioned, like it's more hands off. There's like software to supplement it. But like I'm just thinking of my kid. If I have to like monitor him to do the assessment, like
Yeah.
that's just a full-time job by itself. Because like even at home after school, like I'm getting him because he has
Yeah.
extracurricular activities, right? Like I'm constantly reminding him, like, hey, you remember that thing that you need to practice because you have a lesson coming up? So how does that work?
Yeah. I think there's so one, they'll do now the tools will deliver the right material to your kids and they'll deliver it in a really efficient way. And they'll grade it and update based on what your kid knows and doesn't know, what they deliver them the next day. That software has gotten really good. You do still have to kind of remind them to sit down and do it. And if your kid is like really doesn't like the material, you either have to keep swapping out the materials to find one they like, or you have to sit down next to them and kind of provide that extra motivation. There's a bunch of ways to solve this. One is that you go join a co-op. So there are now these like different places that essentially people are rebuilding schools, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
there are these things called co-ops where different moms will volunteer, or dads will volunteer for a couple days a week. And you can drop your kid off from 8 to 5 and they can hang out and they can go outside and they can play and they can do pottery classes and woodworking classes and then they'll have study halls where someone will kind of sit and make sure that everyone's doing their work. So there are ways to kind of get around that. And then we're building this tool that I think solves a lot of what you're talking about, which is, yeah, how do you keep the kid on track? And to your point about like, is the curriculum the same? That's really up to each parent. I think that's the beauty of homeschooling. is you can do it different. So what's really common for all the parents I talk to is they care a lot about math. They want their kid to be top tier at math, like top 1%, top 0.1%, and they want their kid to be able to read and write really well. And they don't really care if they learn the state science curriculum. And they don't
Mm-hmm.
really, they might care that their kids learn the scientific method, that they learn how to come up with hypotheses and test them and experiment and think about variables and control, but they don't need them to know about cumulonimbus clouds versus cirrus clouds in fifth grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can kick that part of the curriculum. And a lot of them maybe don't want history involved because if, the history curriculums at the lower levels tend to be, um, have the strong word here is propaganda, right? They teach you kind of like a set of things that the state and the federal government are very in support of your kid learning. And so some
Yeah.
people are radical. And so anyways, you kind of pick and choose. I'd say the most common thing for us is they really want their kids to read really well and write really well and to enjoy doing both those things. And they want their kids to be really great at math. Most of them focus really intensely on that. And then the rest of their education is kind of on them becoming an independent learner who's self-motivated, who directs what they do every day, who's curious and follows up on ideas.
So I have a couple of comments here. Like, first of all, actually, my number one reason, and I think my partner's number one reason of why we think even about homeschooling. And I think we think about homeschooling only because this is kind of the only non-traditional school way. We learned that there is also like unschooling, which is different. So,
Yeah.
but this like radical views that are like put upon our kids, I think is the main reason why we look at other alternatives because it's a little bit like can be scary because no matter what you do, if someone tells you 30 times the same message over and over again, you start believing. So kind of as a parent we lose control. It's very hard, and this is the reason we kind of looking at that direction. But math, it's funny that you mentioned math because this is like my biggest question about math specifically. So, you know how in schools, when it comes to math, you are giving guidance because there is this professor or a teacher who knows math in and out. So if your kid can't solve the equation, they help them. Now, as a mom, even though I had good grades in math, I no longer remember that. How
Yeah.
can I really help my kid to be a top 1% in math if I don't have other parents who are confident in guiding my kid through the math? And in fact, just some research, just to like read here that we were, when preparing for this episode, we actually found that math gap is one of the reason like why homeschooling is questionable because students who attend homeschooling are usually not as great in math. And I think that in 2013 researchers Robert Kuzman and Milton Gaither reviewed that the extent research on homeschooling and found evidence that a math gap is real, and it was based on a 1988 study based on 74 Illinois homeschoolers who proved to be not great at math.
Yeah.
So alone speaks from me, but I wonder, like the problem is there. There is a huge concern. So what would you say to those parents, or what your experience has been? How to
Yeah.
get your kid to this 1%?
Yeah. I mean, I have a handful of kind of responses to this. The first is that I really would distinguish between homeschoolers in 1988 and homeschoolers in 2025. These are two really different populations of people, right? In 1998, it was religious people who pulled their kids out of school and didn't want them to learn about evolution and didn't want to learn about a lot of these kind of topics. Whereas today, it's, a huge portion of people who work in tech kids, and that their goals and incentives and the way they homeschool are totally different. So that's one. 1988, 2025,
Okay.
very different. The second thing is kind of a small point, but yeah, if you look at SAT scores and PSAT scores of homeschoolers actually slightly outperform traditional schoolers. But the most interesting point about this is that the variance is huge. In
Mm-hmm.
traditional school, by school, across schools, you have really big variance. You go to a school in the south side of Chicago, the performance is very bad. You go to school in the northern suburbs, it's very good. But intra-school, it's close. In homeschool, You have 13-year-olds who can't read, and you have 9-year-olds who can do calculus.
Mm-hmm.
And what homeschooling has more flexibility as a more degrees of freedom. So there are some people who are really far ahead and some people who are really far behind. So that's kind of point two is that
Mm-hmm.
it's I think it's not the right decision to look at the average when you're looking at homeschoolers.
Okay.
Then the last response is okay, I might not be an expert in math myself. How can I make sure that my kid becomes really excellent at math? Because if you look at it, math is the number one predictor of income later in life. It's the number one predictor of country's GDP. There's all these things that kind of demonstrate that math is really valuable for kids to get good at. So how do I make sure my kid's really good at math? The short answer is you find them the right curriculum and you check in on their progress weekly. And if you notice their progress is behind or slow, you supplement it with a few tutoring hours. One-to-one tutoring is like massively, massively effective. There's this really famous study called Bloom's Two Sigma problem, which you may have heard of, um, which is that you can take a kid who's uh, in the 50th percentile for math, and through one-on-one tutoring, you can take that kid from the 50th percentile to the 98th percentile. And so you can take a kid who's average in math and really propel them really forward through tutoring. And so my answer would be like, first, you pick a really great curriculum. I'll recommend two. If your kid does Beast Academy or Math Academy and they spend 30 to 40 minutes of focus on it per day, I can almost guarantee they will test within the top 5%. It's just that simple. And if they're not doing that well, then recommend getting kind of a tutor. And I can talk about why those two softwares are so good. And a lot of it goes back to traditional learning science design around having very granular steps. So each time you encounter a new topic, it's just a tiny bit of new information. They use spaced repetition. So, once you learn an idea, it comes back to you every month, every 3 months, every 6 months. This is something schools don't do. And then the last part is it's mastery based. So in school, you're in a class of kids and the class needs to keep going. And so if you get a 60 on a
Mm-hmm.
test, stinks. Time to
Mm-hmm.
move on to the next
Mm-hmm.
topic. In these programs in homeschool, if you get a 60% on a test or you get an 85% on a test, uh, you just keep taking the test until you get 100%. You keep working on the material. And when you develop 100% mastery over material, your ability to encounter new topics and how quickly you pick them up goes up, a lot. And these things have been known for kind of a long time in the learning science space. They just have been hard to implement into schools. And so, yeah, my short answer to how do you make your kid really great at math is it's not too complicated. Um, Pick a great curriculum, Math Academy or Beast Academy, and check in on the results once a week and be proud of them when they do their math homework. Show some excitement and happiness when they come and show you that they finished. Um, and I think that'll work.
Yeah. No, I actually I like that you mentioned this whole math thing because I was actually thinking that like academics for my kids is like less important in that sense, just because I'm like, okay, like just thinking about the future of AI. I feel like a lot of that AI will take away some of the traditional learnings that I guess I learned as a kid, the math, the multiplications and all that, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like it is gonna slowly go away, but I still think it's critical for them to understand it. But like what are your views on like homeschooling about the soft skills? Because like I guess the disadvantage
Yeah.
that I see with homeschooling, it's like, okay, they don't have the team building skills because they have a group of friends.
Yeah.
They don't have the skills of like countering even bullying or countering negative comments or
Yeah.
new friends presenting in front of a class. Like those are, I feel like a critical soft skills that any kids would really benefit in the future, right? So where does that fit in homeschooling?
Actually,
Yeah.
do you mind before you reply? I just want to read a quote from Reddit,
Okay.
where a man says, "I get so frustrated. Homeschooling ruined my life and is still affecting me in my 40s. I couldn't hold down a job due to social anxiety and workplace bullying because I never learned to deal with that." So, Wendy, your concern is real, and it's very dramatic to read this type of messages, but yeah.
Yeah. I'll one be mean to that person first and say in your 40s
Yeah.
you should cope with your problems and solve and make your life good yourself and not blame it on your childhood. But not to get too aggressive and yell at this Reddit commenter.
No, we
Uh,
are aggressive moms here, so that's
okay,
good.
cool. Yeah, my second thought is there's kind of two answers to, yeah, again, I have a bunch of responses. The first is that, again, homeschooling today is kind of more like hybrid schooling than homeschooling. So you can get your kid in a building with 100 other kids, presenting in front of groups, going out to the playground, encountering all the same by signing up for a co-op, as a simple example. And they'll be there every day, and it's really cheap and it's easy, and you can kind of supplement that. Um, the second thing I'll say that I noticed is let's be reductive and call someone weird if they are missing these skills,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you call them socially weird. They don't know how to fit in. They're kind of an outcast. There's two things kind of about homeschooling. One is there's selection effects. So the people who homeschool tend, especially in the past, tend to be missing a lot of these social skills themselves. There's like a correlation between people who are kind of on the outskirts of society and choose to pull their kids out of traditional school and do something different. And so what I've noticed is that if parents do have great social skills, their kids tend to have really great social skills. And when you
Mm-hmm. Okay.
homeschool, your kids will be more similar to you
Mm-hmm.
than if they go to traditional school. So if you work really hard and you are really diligent and you're really fear tolerant and failure tolerant and you have great social kids skills, your kids will be more like that than if you sent them to traditional school. If you are you don't work very hard, you have a really hard time encountering hard problems and you give up on them, you don't have any social skills, your kids will be more like you than if they went to traditional school. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the first point. Plus this co-op thing. The second part, I would say, yeah, I don't, the socialization thing, I don't, just having taught a few thousand of them, I don't think it's, yeah, I just don't think it's that true or relevant. I think most of it is this like selection effects and how you set up your kids' day. Otherwise, do they play sports? Do they go to theater? Do you send them up for other things? You still need to kind of give them good opportunities. What I do notice as being a huge problem across all of them is bullying.
Mm-hmm.
Unable to tolerate or deal with somebody who is intentionally being mean to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that many parents in the homeschool, given the option of protecting their kid from someone being mean to them and not protecting their kid from someone being mean to them, most parents cannot handle intentionally subjugating their kid to that experience,
Yeah.
subjecting their kid to that experience. And they will avoid bullying like the plague. So if they take them to a co-op and there's someone who's mean there, we're not going to that co-op anymore. And if I
Mm-hmm.
put them on a baseball team and someone's mean to them on the baseball team, we're not going to that baseball team anymore. That's common across everyone. And my experience is that absolutely is bad. And it is absolutely something that's very hard to deal with later in life. And you do encounter it in the workplace, in social settings, and if you don't have practice with it, it's hard. And it's really hard to get on a call with a bunch of homeschool parents and tell them that you should try to get your kid to be bullied more often. That is not a popular. I would say that's of all the other things, the social skills, the this, the that. I don't worry about any of that. I know so many really cool homeschoolers. That part I do worry about, and I don't.
Well,
Have a good
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's even for homeschooling. I think it's for public school too. Like
Yeah,
like my kid is now in grade 4, and there's different parents group that he has, gone through from, daycare to preschool to kindergarten and things like that. And I feel like parents in general are just protective of their kids.
yeah,
But it's like, so I don't think it's just homeschooling. I think it's kind of all
yes,
spread. But it's just society. Obviously, we want to equip our kids with the most loving environment, but the world's not built us with this way, unfortunately. And
yeah,
so it's just like having that skill set, right? And I feel like these kind of things is like you can't just practice it, right? It has to come through real life, and then we can talk about it after,
really,
and then have those learning moments. And that's kind of why I see I'm like maybe homeschooling is missing that. But I do see your point of like that co-op, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like even
huge
how
call.
you explained it is similar
Yeah.
to even Montessori. Because Montessori,
Yeah,
it's like a mix of like kind of homeschooling in a sense where you're progressing based on the skill set of that child.
yeah,
Because my kids are actually all through Montessori, not
cool.
the traditional Montessori, but like the public school Montessori. So it's not as probably Montessori as I would like it to be. Yeah, so it's adopted to their skill set. Like, my kids love math, so he's like way past his peers where, he's a little bit less on the, the writing side. So, he's supplemented, right? So I feel like it's like a mix from what you're telling me as well. So that was
Yeah,
interesting for me.
yeah, yeah, and it's a hard needle to thread.
Yeah.
How much bullying is the right amount of bullying is a very difficult
Yes, but
question to answer.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's hard. It's
As
hard. Like kids are unintended kind of bullying. They don't intend like bad will. I find a lot of times, like even when I'm like chatting with like scenarios that happen with my kids,
yeah,
like I don't feel like they have bad intentions. It's just they don't know how to communicate, in a way that may be mindful of other people's feelings, right? And
yeah,
and that's where it's like, hurting other people's feelings and then, dealing with that, right? So I feel like it's part of growing up. And it's hard
yeah.
to navigate that.
Really hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the most complicated one I agree with you. It's not just true of homeschoolers. It's with the homeschoolers, they have more control over their kids' day.
Mm.
Maybe like the tendency to want to overprotect gets you can take it farther.
yeah. One of the things that I'm actually wondering about is, again, some of the comments that I read obviously come from people who are older, who were
Yeah.
homeschooled like 20 years ago and things like that. But like, is a legal system in US designed to like protect children from maybe like, I don't know, neglect? Because obviously, like, there are parents who are like, oh, I want homeschooling because I want the best for my child. So I will be
Yep.
there for them, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There can be parents that take their kids out of school because of bullying, because they're like, okay, I don't want to deal with that. But then a kid is there and like, who knows, like they may be even using Recess or any other software, but they're just not doing anything. And the parents doesn't check on them. And then, 20 years later, they're sitting and like, now I cannot do anything in life. I only can be like working, I don't know, or maybe no longer working because of AI. Anything like about that specific topic? Maybe not like in details, high level.
At the really high level, the answer is that it's a state's right issue. Education is a state. Each state designs it themselves, and especially now because they shut down the federal Department of Education,
Mm.
it's even more, or they really reduced its budget. It's even more a state issue, and it's really state by state. So in some states, they have
Mm-hmm.
zero reporting laws. You don't have to actually
Mm-hmm.
put anything in, and nobody comes and checks on you. And in states like California, you have to be a part of a charter school network,
Mm-hmm.
and you have regular check-ins where someone comes by your house and walks through your house and checks over the kids' work.
Mm-hmm.
And they make sure, and they have them take proctored state exams once a year to make sure they're on grade level or moving at grade level. And if they underperform, that charter school that sponsors you as a homeschooler will get shut down. So it really depends state to state. Some states,
Mm-hmm.
there is a lot of oversight to protect against neglect from parents, and in some states, there's none.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Got it. And another thing that I like really, now was wondering, right? So you did mention that you can give your child to a co-op, and now let's say if I live in small town, what type of co-op am I going to find? What if there are like no people around me? What do I do?
It's common. I would say like rural is overrepresented for homeschooling by a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two
Okay.
reasons. One is again, I think people who choose to live rurally tend to again be more comfortable being on the outskirts of society. But the second is that their local schools probably aren't that good. And so that's really common. Like we have a lot of kids who are from rural places, but their parents went to Stanford and Penn and they want their kids to have a good education and they live there for a variety of reasons and there's just nothing nearby they can give their kids that's good. And so I'd say the co-op situation is similar to the school situation, right? If you live somewhere where there aren't great co-ops, there's probably also not great schools. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it can be limited. And then I think those people turn to something like Recess, which is a network of kids who work hard and do diligent things, and their parents care a lot about their education to kind of get exposure to more people like that. And then they have their kids play sports and do theater and do pottery and that kind of stuff locally. And they have them do academics kind of on the internet. The same way that, you know, the I do most of my work on the internet and network with people who on the internet more so than I do in person. In person is
Mm-hmm.
can have a social life. I can go bowling on the weekends. I can go hang out. I can go to concerts. And then if I want to talk to someone who's really deep in education and is looking at all learning science and building software, I meet most of those people on the internet. And so that's something that's common for people who live rurally too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I'm also curious. Like you said, parents can choose their curriculum. Like, how flexible are they in that curriculum? Because I'm just thinking, like, is AI part of that curriculum? Because that's obviously not part of the traditional school. Like any extracurricular activities, like I don't know, piano, or you mentioned sports. Is that all kind of like, do you customize that, or how do you do that?
If you're a homeschooler,
Yeah.
yeah, this is the hardest part. So even though you can outsource lots of the individual pieces, you still have to you still have to like construct the
Mm,
whole day and the whole week, right? And that is a lot of
Mm-hmm.
work. And I would say that's the hardest part. And so a lot of people will kind of go to buy like all-in-one solutions. They'll join a co-op that has 10 extracurricular classes that your kids can sample and choose from, some in art, some in music, some in athletics, and then they'll buy an all-in-one curriculum, like a time for learning, which does every subject. And then they really just have to buy two things, like a co-op pass and a curriculum pass. And I would say um, that does not work that well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you'll tend to get a pretty bad curriculum if there are people who really obsess over teaching fourth to sixth grade math, and they are the best at teaching fourth to sixth grade math. And it's really valuable to use that software instead of this other one. And same as, there's great soccer clubs near you, and there's great music teachers near you, and there are bad music teachers near you. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you're not too involved, you might not be able to put together the right stuff. That's actually what the product that we're building now. And to your point about like how flexible is curriculum, super flexible. You can do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
Even in states where they have regulations, so long as you meet their bars, which the bars are pretty low, the schools do not set a high bar for what the kids can accomplish. So in almost every homeschooler you talk to, their kids will get their academics done in less than 2 hours. So they have most of their day free. You have tons of flexibility and freedom. This thing that we're building now is meant to solve this. It's an AI uh, education manager. You kind of talk
Mm-hmm.
about your values and your goals and what's your kids like and what you want out of their educational experience. And the kid also will talk to it and kind of tell it what the kid would like to do and all this kind of stuff and how it would like to support the kid. Um, and it will then spawn agents that go off and do tons of research and find all these materials, and it's connected to the Common Core lessons and all these kinds of things and generates transcripts and tests and assessments. And it will go find the best material for your kid for each one of your goals. And it will then automatically create an account, start a subscription, let you know what's happening, and then send you texts every few days about your kid's progress, if they're on track, if they're ahead of schedule. Here are the different softwares they're using. You can cancel any of them or adjust it if you want. And you can just text back and it will go and do everything for you. And so you essentially have what happened was I was doing this for a handful of kids where I was acting as a consultant. And I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I've read basically every study that's come out of Stanford and MIT in the last 15 years about learning science and materials. I've gone and played with them all. I worked on them at Synthesis and other things. We brought in, our lead engineer was the first engineer at Khan Academy and the CTO at Synthesis. And so we're really knowledgeable about curriculums and materials and which ones work and which ones don't, and how you should piece them together and when you should layer in one-on-one tutoring for best results and when you should have them in a group and all that kind of stuff. And so I was acting as a one-on-one consultant for families. I would meet with them,
Mm-hmm.
talk to them for 60 minutes, and then I'd go, okay, let me give you a little plan about what to do. And then let's meet again in 3 weeks and ask how it's going, and we'll update it. And so we've essentially now built an agentic system, a little AI that does all this for you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, because I think it's a huge problem. Okay, I want to homeschool. I want my kid to be great at math and great at reading. And
Mm-hmm.
they love music, and I'd love for them to understand the intersection between music and math. That would be a cool thing to come out of this year. Now what? It's easy to
Mm-hmm.
say those
And
things.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Follow.
Like, so that's why it's like, okay, I'm a like career-oriented mom who
Yeah.
works like, let's say, 9 to 5 job. Okay. Can
By the way,
homeschooling be even part of my schedule? Like, can I even homeschool my kids? Is it even an option for me? It sounds like no.
do you work
But
from
what,
home?
um, I mean, recently, yes, but we are more like an office type of oriented environment. So they prefer
I think
us to go to the office.
if both parents are out of the house, yes, I think it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You have to really
Okay.
organize your childcare. Um, and that's a whole thing. And again, there are good co-ops and things that you can join and that can help. But if both parents are outside the home, it is hard. If parents are inside the home, from what I've seen, the
Mm-hmm.
best setup is when both parents work, especially, for example, for young girls. I think it's really valuable to have their mom work and to be able to see them work. And I think one of the biggest lessons about that I've picked up from kids is that they're copy machines. The monkey see, monkey do thing is actually very real. They won't really listen to what you say. They will mimic you. So if they see you working hard throughout the day, that will be natural to them and kind of what they think life looks like. And if they see you loafing around and watching TV all day, that's what they think life will look like and what's expected of them. And um, and so my
Mm-hmm.
favorite homeschoolers are the ones where both parents work and both parents have relatively high-powered careers and they care a lot. I was talking to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, and there aren't that many women who are CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies in Silicon Valley. She's homeschooling
Mm-hmm.
her kids. She's also teaching her kid math herself, and I'm like, how do you have the time? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but
How? Tell us. What did she reply?
well, she's trying to outsource it. So her and I were talking, and
Okay.
her kid's going to join our stuff because she's hitting the same problem. And we have another parent like this whose dad is like a famous AI researcher and like one of the most followed YouTubers on how to build AI research. And mom is a math professor, full-time math
Mm-hmm.
professor. And again, it's like we want our kid to be really good at math. We can't really teach them, so they're outsourcing it to us to have us work with them.
Mm.
But yeah, I think the best from what I've seen is the kids who have the best disposition, the best focus, the best these things have parents working at home. And
Okay. So
I
number
think
one requirement for homeschooling is to be able to work remotely, basically at
I
home,
think
so
I
that.
think one parent needs to be at home. Yeah, it's hard to leave an
Mm-hmm.
8-year-old home alone.
Yep.
Borderline impossible, I think.
Well, that makes
Okay.
And I wanted to ask more questions about like what your platform is. You
Yeah.
Yeah,
mentioned like how is that different than like the traditional homeschooling? Because like the homeschooling that I'm exposed to is like there
yeah,
is actually a curriculum as part of the public school system, and you get to
yep,
choose, right? It's like you can
yep,
actually homeschool, and then from my understanding, it's like the mom or the dad follows that BC, we're in BC curriculum, follows all that, and have all those things, right? So how is your platform able to help or elevate that homeschooling experience?
And also you mentioned like outsourcing. What does it mean, like outsourcing in yours? Yeah, interesting.
yeah. I would say a lot of our customers out. It's not really home. Like we've got a bunch of customers who pay us 15,000, 20,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're really piecing together a full private school experience, just with all their
Mm-hmm.
parts they like the best.
Okay.
And so at that point, like, is it homeschool if your kid is in 5 hours of class and has two private tutors and you're using all other curriculums? Your kid is at home doing education, but you're not exactly the home is not schooling them. And so I think that is kind of like one difference. And so yeah, that's what outsourcing means is you basically find some really competent individuals or company, um, and you rely on them to teach your kids and you kind of are like the CEO, but you're not the COO or the secretary or any of the lower levels. You really sit at that high level of like, what's the vision for how my kid should be educated? And then you have other people come and execute on your vision. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
homeschooling I think is getting really popular. The parent has some particular idea about the skills they'd like their kids to develop, the traits, the culture they want them to be involved with, the peers they want them to spend time with, and they find other people who make that true. And so what do we do as a platform? We do a few things. The first is we curate, I think, the best teachers. Uh, I'm biased obviously, but I think the best teachers on the planet. If you want to learn how to do 3D CAD design, we have
Mm-hmm.
one of the top 5 YouTubers who teaches that on YouTube, teaching in small private room classes, kids who do want to do that. And so if you want to learn about how to design computer chips. We've got someone who works at NVIDIA teaching kids how to do that in Minecraft. So it's in a format they're familiar with, but teaching them, like what is RAM? How do you do these things? How do you access
Sounds
those things?
fun.
Super fun.
I'm getting sold here. I'm like, now I'm going to save money to spend $15,000 on
You don't have to spend
recess.
our average customer
You
spends
don't
200.
have.
Our
Okay.
average customer spends 200 a month. That's really
Hmm.
the top end is. But yeah, so we curate these amazing teachers from around the world who are experts in their domain, who are have demonstrated exceptional ability to teach and explain ideas by being really popular on YouTube. We have a class on how to write for TV shows taught by someone who's written for, a bunch of
Hmm.
shows. And that's really
Yeah.
fun because they can bring in a script that they wrote last year and they can punch it down and write jokes in and whatever. And
Yeah.
that's great. And so that's part number
Do
one.
you take 33 years old into your
We do not.
homeschooling program?
I'm really radical. We don't even take 15
I
year
will
olds.
pretend like I'm my son.
No, you know what's interesting is you're mentioning these, like these are all the, I guess, like extracurricular activities that my son, like he's now 8 years old, like spring
Yeah.
camps, summer camps, like that's what he's
Yep.
interested in, right? And that's what I enroll
Yep.
him in because those are
Yep.
the things that he's like, fun and interested in, right? Like
Yep.
what you're offering, like a homeschooling platform where people like parents can choose, like I guess the most ideal courses that makes up that day. Like, would
Yep.
that be equivalent to let's say like just like a traditional schooling and then you supplement it with extracurricular? Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the differences.
Yeah. So I think that is one is like all the things you might do after school on the weekends. We kind of take them one level more serious
Yeah.
and believe like these things are actually can be super, super educational and they should
Hmm.
kind of be part of your kid's core stack. Um, and
Yeah. And I just one thing I just kind of came to mind was like I feel like traditional schooling as like how we do it is like, oh, there's math, there's English.
yeah,
But like you can't build a career just based on math and English, right? And
Hmm.
that's where
Yeah.
I see the huge disconnect is. And
yes,
that's why like on any extracurricular activities I even like enroll with my kids, it's like, okay, how can I develop their soft skills, like their people skills? Like those are the
yeah,
things that like I felt as I was growing up. These are the things like hard learnings I have to, really deal with as I became an adult. Like I was
yeah.
never taught how to deal with, I don't know, all these other soft skills that didn't have preview to, right? So like, would you say like homeschooling allows people to develop some more of that kind of skill set versus just like traditional like math, English, and those type of things?
Oh yeah, it's really the answer is
Up to the
not
parents.
something
Okay.
which is it's super flexible. Yeah, if
Yeah.
that's important to you, I think you can do a way better job than the schools at delivering that. And like we make classes, for example, where the kids get split up into teams. Have you read Ender's Game?
No.
Okay, it's a sci-fi book. We make this where kids get split up into teams and they compete against each other in these different strategy simulations. And it gets, super heated and the kids are yelling all the time and they deal with
Hmm.
conflict and what happens when you disagree about what the right strategy is? How do you resolve that? One of their team kind of cheated. What do you do about that? There's all of these
Hmm.
things that come into play. And so we kind of will design some experiences that are specifically for developing skills like that. And I think we're not the only ones who do cool things like that. My former company was Synthesis. That's when I worked at. It was born out of the SpaceX lab school. So Elon had started a school at SpaceX and hired this guy named Josh Don to come with unlimited budget and all that stuff. And his best class that he had developed was called Synthesis. And so we were taking that class, turning it into software and scaling on the internet. It was basically strategy and teamwork simulations for kids. And that is, I started this company based on kind of what I learned there and about creating different situations. So the first question was like, yeah, so what is the research platform? How does it help with these things? How does it help you design kind of a holistic experience? So we have this one product, which is an AI academics manager. It will find you the best curriculums. It will proctor and administer testing. It will check up on what's working and make sure that you're kind of really far ahead. That's product number one. And what's cool about it is because it's an AI that's doing it, it also actually happens to know what your kid is able to do in these different topics. And it will do fun things like suggest them YouTube videos about how the math they just learned is applicable in their favorite game, right? And so you can start to get some of these connections. So that's product number one, great academics. Product number two is this marketplace of outstanding classes. And these are live synchronous classes with other kids. So you're going to meet tons of people. You're going to talk to cool teachers. you're going to build things. And you're going to do
Mm-hmm.
those very often on teams and cooperatively. And so you'll pick up lots of social skills just from being in a group working on something. I tend to think that the best way to develop social skills is to be a part of a group that has a goal. And sometimes you need some pressure because that's actually where I think like the most kind of emotionally intensive times happen, where there are kind of the big opportunities for learning. And so part number one, great academics. Part number two, exceptional classes, cooperative and live synchronous classes. And then part number three is a bunch of tools to connect your kids with other kids who they've met through classes. So let's say they take, for me, like I think one of the most important parts of raising your kids is making sure they have really great peers, educating them. Like that goes a really far way. And again, monkey see, monkey do. If they're around people who work really hard and are building things all the time, they'll pick up the same cultural values. And if they're around kids who kind of goof off all the time and are troublemakers, they'll kind of pick up the same values, right? And so if you sign your kid up for classes where they're learning how to design computer chips and where they're building games and they're learning how to conduct and write their own music on the computer, they're going to meet other kids who are also doing those things. And then we make ways for your kids to stay connected with them and spend time together and hang out. And they get like chat and calling and kids on recess spend about like a lot of time on recess just talking to their friends, like 10 hours a week. Um, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's the second part is you got these great academics, you got these great classes, and then we turn all of that into a great network.
I have two questions. One, as a mom, and another as a product manager in SaaS who knows a little
Yeah.
bit about AI. So,
Yeah.
as a mom, can you just describe us quickly, maybe how an average day of a kid who
Mhm.
works with recess and is homeschooled looks like? Just imagine that mostly, like, let's say a parent maybe just does your regular things and allows like to select like
Yeah.
uses like curriculum selection and also let's say also maybe hires one tutor. So how would a day in life of a kid look like?
Usually, it's academics in the morning.
Okay.
So they'll wake up, they'll walk downstairs, they'll cook breakfast with their parents and sit down and hang out and have breakfast. They might go outside and play for a little bit, but sometime kind of in the first few hours of the day, it's it's a ritual for them to sit down, focus, and solve hard problems for a couple
Mm-hmm.
hours. And at the end of that, they walk away with kind of this big feeling of accomplishment and productivity. You know, when you like procrastinate all day and you feel terrible, and you know, when you get a lot done in the morning and you feel great. I'd
Yep,
say most
for sure.
kids, so they wake up, they kind of mosey around, sit down, and focus for about 2 hours on academics.
So do they
And
like log in to recess, create like describe details like okay,
yeah,
I
yeah.
have my
So they'll,
login password.
if you're working with us for the full stack, you're doing everything with us.
Mm-hmm.
You'll log in, you'll join a call at a Zoom call at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. or 10 a.m., depending on kind of what
Mm-hmm.
it is. And a group of kids will be working silently, near silently. It's like kind of like
Mm.
a library. And
Okay.
a whole bunch of kids will be focused. They'll be working with their individual curriculums that's picked for them, that make sense for them specifically, both based on their level and their pace and their interests. And they'll work hard on that. And there will be a teacher in the room who they can basically call on and get one-on-one help from. And so it'll be someone who they can get this direct instruction. They'll do that, and then they'll move on to the next hour, which is English or reading. It depends kind of what their stack is, what they set up. But so they'll do 2 hours of that. So usually it's an hour of math and then an hour of like history slash writing, reading, or history slash science. Because a lot of times they'll be reading science materials or history materials to train their practice. That ends about 11 o'clock, and they're open. They usually have a break and they hang out. At noon, we have something called community hour or recess, which is where all the kids come on and log on at once, and they're all like in a virtual world running around playing. And they can join that
Mm.
and meet kids and play games and hang out. This is like their pure break time. And in the afternoon, they might go to Kerbal Space Program at 1 o'clock, where you are building rockets and launching them and trying to figure out how to land on the moon. And you're doing that in a group of 4 kids. They're calculating things like thrust to weight ratio and this and what orbit do I need to be at. And they're building and braking. And again, there's a teacher in the room who really knows a lot about rocket design and astrodynamics and orbital mechanics who's coaching them on that. And then, the class is over at 2 and they might jump in a voice call with their friends to keep building rockets because they've decided that they're going to try and land on the moon this week to beat the challenge. and they'll do that for an hour or two, and maybe they'll have one more class similar. Maybe they join like, a Figma design class because some kids are into UX design and recess. And then at 4 o'clock, a lot of them will go to, you know, start playing a sport, or they'll go to a music group, or they'll go join, then they usually have extracurriculars from like 3 o'clock after school. They do the same kind of stuff that other kids do after school. I would say they do more after school stuff since they're not in school. So
Hmm.
where they're running around, and then I think at night they come home and they read books or play games or do whatever kind of is normal at the house. And so they're kind of out of the house from like maybe 4 to 7, and they're back home doing
Hmm.
stuff. And that would be like a normal day. So you
Hmm.
do a bunch of you focus hard on academics, you play with your friends, you build rockets and launch them, you go play some sports or do some music and fun things, and then you come home and hang out and have dinner.
Okay, well, sounds exciting. I don't know, Wendy, what do you think?
No,
A
I
little
like the
online
curriculum.
for sure, but yeah, curriculum is fun.
Yeah, I feel like it's like engaging as well, because that's what I mentioned before, right? I feel like a lot of the course that you put into your day is like the extracurricular that my son
Yeah.
loves, right? It's like the spring camps, the summer camps, where it's like his interests. So I feel like there's a good mixture, and I like that there is, I guess, like a teacher or somebody, an adult in that room, kind of like there's questions that, because that was one thing, right? I'm like, homeschooling seems like a lot of work when Anya and I were talking about. Like, I can't
Hmm.
even imagine having to teach my kid for
Yeah.
7 hours a week. I mean, 7 hours a day times five. Like, that's just insane.
Hmm.
Like, just having, an adult figure in the
Yes.
room, being able to govern that, making sure that they're quiet time, like,
Hmm.
doing stuff right. I think that's really critical, because I feel
Yep.
homeschooling, it's like basically, hey, go through work on these worksheets, and I have to chase
Yep.
it
Yeah.
down.
That day I described to you, by the way, would cost maybe $3,500 a year. And your
Oh,
kid will
Hmm.
and your kid will test top 1%, I'm pretty sure, if they join that math group and reading group.
that's awesome.
Nice.
That's
That's amazing. Well, one of the things that I have a final question is because we are sassy moms and we kind of work in SaaS, we understand a little bit of things.
Yep.
So, you mentioned that you're using AI
Yeah.
agents in order to gather this curriculum information and things like that. So, how do you ensure within your organization, in terms of development, QA, and things like that, that actually I can be, as a mother, confident that you're not going to make a mistake? And that information that you collect for me is actually, correct. And you don't accidentally pull some sheets for me, which are, I don't know, from another country, or maybe a different age, or I don't know what else can there be.
Yeah, so there's a few there's the first thing I think about, yeah, is right, AIs, even though they've fixed a lot of the problems, they still hallucinate and they make all
Absolutely.
sorts of mistakes. And so the first thing is you need ground source truth. You need a ground source truth that the AI works off of. And the longer the AI works and the more it does, the more those hallucinations and mistakes compound, right? And so if you have it try and do really
Exactly.
long coding tasks, it's much worse than if you give it a very small coding task. And if you give it a very small coding task and it makes some error, if you correct it and say, here are the errors that we got back, it again is much better at kind of going back and trying to refix the problem. Same is true for us. So the first thing, if we want to get really technical, the first thing is there's a 500,000 row database of all of the standards that might be applicable to any kid. And those are broken down by their location. And so these things have codes like 41C39A, right? And
Hmm.
that code might relate to, dividing fractions. And it might relate, they get very specific. So that might relate to dividing fractions when both fractions are less than a fourth or greater than a
Hmm.
fourth, right? And so whatever. So they're very specific things. Those all have tests and assessments correlated with them. And they're standardized, right? The standardized tests. So you can give a kid a standardized test, like a MAP test or an NWEA alternative test or a PISA test. There's a handful of different ones that are popular in different places. And from that test, you'll get back the results. And you can map those results to the Common Core or to these standards, right? They understand these fractions perfectly. They understand this thing kind of, and so forth. And so that's part number one, is that we have a ground source truth, which is based on standardized tests. So the AI is making guesses about what your kid is good and bad at, but we always refer back to the standardized tests to decide with total certainty. And so every time this happens, the AI is ingesting this database and then making decisions about just what they should do tomorrow based on what they know the kid knows. They're not figuring out what they should do for the whole year. They're not figuring out what they should do next week. It's just tomorrow. And we have all these micro assessments that come in regularly to basically check the AI's work. That's kind of part number one. So part number one is you have this big knowledge graph of all the content that a kid could cover. You have these assessments, which actually tell you which things they understand and which things they don't. The third is a redundancy. So we plug into all the different curriculum providers that you might use and get the data out of those. So each curriculum provider, let's say you're working with Math Academy, they have their own, you've seen it, like your kid has done this unit, this one's a circle that's filled in, they haven't done this unit, this is a circle that's not filled in. And they have their own assessments. And so we also add those in. And so we've got two different systems checking for what they know and don't know, both what the curriculum itself thinks, what the standardized test thinks. And then we have a third that we let the AI kind of reason about it, because the AI will notice some things that the systems won't. A small example is a kid might test that they understand multiplication tables perfectly. They don't miss any questions, but it's not a timed test. And the AI might notice that it took them, 40 seconds to multiply 5 times 9, and it had access to the scratch pad, and they noticed that the kid checked their work by adding 9 5 times to make sure they got it right. And the AI will notice that this kid doesn't have confidence in their times tables, even though the test will say it did. And so there's a third. So the first system is the standardized tests. The second system is the curriculums give us the data themselves. The third is that the AI will notice these kind of granular things and send them in. And then each day, we try and break down what the AI is guessing about to do next into as small bits as possible. So it's ingesting all this data that's very structured, and then we kind of constrain it to output very structured data to figure out what it should do the next day. And then you do classic things like you have chain of thought, and you have different agents. You have adversarial agents, if you're familiar with that term. So you have agents that are basically trying to prove the other agent wrong, and they're fighting with each other. And they fight with each other in the background to figure out what's right and what's not. And then what's cool is because we have these assessments that happen, we can check whether the AI's intervention had a positive effect or negative effect because we're getting test data, right? And so we can start to learn when the AI is making good recommendations or bad recommendations. And so anyways, I don't know if that was too technical, but
We are making podcasts for technical moms, so
cool. Yeah. So that's a bunch of different ways, and there probably are a few extra parts.
I'm sure like you and Anya can geek out on all these AI.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would love to actually, like, in a different time, I'll screen share and show you guys through the backend system. We visualized all the knowledge graphs in a way that's super cool, and you can see these things and you can get a feel. I could show you. It's actually pretty fun to.
I mean, honestly, if you can send us, like, okay, I don't know how confidential is, but if you can send us some snippets, maybe deleting some confidential data, we can definitely put it into our screenshot. While you're talking through that, we can just show it. But it's obviously up to you. We don't want any secrets to be stolen.
No, well, we're good. I won't share any kid data if I send you stuff.
Well, I appreciate you explaining all that, and I think I learned a lot for homeschooling because I think I have
Absolutely.
one, understanding of what it is based on, my understanding of but I feel like you expanded my view of what homeschooling could be. Actually, one last question from me. It's like, your platform. I know it's geared towards like homeschooling, but like, is it good?
Yeah, you can. We have people who use it as a supplement, as an extracurricular.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah. We don't market it that way. But probably about 20 to 30% of our users are in traditional schools.
Yeah, because
And
like I'm really intrigued about the courses that you mentioned. I think my kids will love it, so I'll definitely check it out.
8-year-olds, I really, really, really recommend this class called Mindustry. If you have an 8-year-old who's into kind of engineering-y stuff,
Yeah.
it's
I'll
like
definitely check it
team-based
out.
simulations. You build a factory that builds robots to battle other robots, and the whole game is secretly a study in linear algebra and logistics science, and it's
Wow.
awesome. And it's really fun.
Well, Ben, you just got almost paid subscriber right there
Cool.
on a podcast. I guess your goal is accomplished.
Yeah,
Great.
no, I really appreciate you hopping on and sharing your insights and helping us understand a little bit more about homeschooling and for our listeners as well, right?
Yep.
I think as a mom, I'm always intrigued on like different learning methods and how do I like equip my kids, right? Because I just feel like the environment now is very
Yeah.
different than how I was schooled, before. So just learning from others is really great. Well, thank you, Ben, for hopping on to our podcast and sharing all these insights with us. So how can listeners be able to find you as well as Recess?
You can, I'm on Twitter and I tweet all the time. I'm on X. You can find me at Ben_N_Summers. I'm usually posting new learning science research or commenting on standards that are happening in different states. Mississippi just made this big leap in reading, and I'll talk about how they did it and why they did it. And so if you like that kind of stuff, you can go follow me on X or on Twitter. And then if you want to get a hold of me at Recess, you can just go to recess.gg and sign up, or you can email me at ben@recess.gg. I reply to every email and usually pretty fast. So that's my personal line if you want to get straight to the source.
Direct line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, I pretty appreciate it. So yeah, thank you. And then we hope to see you again next week at the next SaaSy Moms episode. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye-bye.